back, everybody. It is Tuesday night, and that means it's time for another episode of Theater Talk Live. That's right, the show that tells you everything that you need to know about home theater and all kinds of other things, whatever I decide to talk about. But tonight, we got a good one. This is going to be a good show for you. Outside of the normal news and all that kind of stuff, we've got a guest that we've never had before, and I'm super excited to have on with us. And I'm going to give you a little background on my relationship with the brand, but here with us is Richard from Indie Audio Labs, which is Acurus and Aragon. Richard, welcome. How are you?
Good.
Awesome, man. So you're joining us tonight from a wonderful room with some really cool gear in the background. That we're gonna talk about that in a little bit. Yeah, absolutely. I think to get things kicked off, though, if you could tell people a little bit about who you are, what you do, and why they should care.
Okay, well, let's see what we can do with that. So I'm Richard. I'm the director of sales for Acurus and Aragon for Indie Audio Labs. And why you should care? Well, we have an exciting brand. And I come from the world that, customers, if they're a DIYer or a dealer comes from, I've installed a ton of this stuff. So I was previously just mostly worried about getting the product, selling it, and I liked it so much. Here I am working for IEL.
Nice.
That would be like saying, I like driving this truck so much, I want to go work for Ford. That's kind of the approach I took, right?
Right
so
on.
I think if anything, that's kind of exciting. So now if a dealer calls me, they're dealing with a guy that likes the product so much, I wanted to play with it every day and kind of share that excitement to the world. So we'll see if we can kind of convey that.
Yeah, it's really easy to get excited about the products, from the two brands. I mean, it's just amazing. I was just thinking too, just before we got started tonight, so everybody's like, back to your roots. Yeah, because I've talked about this brand for a long time, and what I was going to say is that I think I've watched more content on a system with a Acurus or Aragon component, one or another, over the last 5 years, more than anything else. At least like 90% of the content that I've watched has had one of these, a component, one or another in the system. It's kind of crazy just to kind of think back, over time. And Shubrubrin, I say his name different every time. Back to products, what made this channel amazing. Yeah, I appreciate that. So yeah, this is legit good stuff. And Richard is new-ish to the family there, I think. When did you get?
I'm newish to the company, but I've played with the product for quite some time, so I know the product pretty well. But I'm new to actually working for Indie Audio Labs since this year, right around the time of Expona.
Okay, last year.
No, this
year.
Expona a couple months ago.
Okay, I remember talking to you there. So that was the time.
Yeah, we talked for like 10 minutes at Expona.
Yeah. Okay. Right on. Cool. Siphonics calls out one of the things that I first saw when you came on. Nice Dynaudios back there. That's right. We're going to talk about those Dynaudios in just a bit, but there is an agenda, and we're going to follow it kind of. Now, for everybody that's joining, if you have any questions, don't be shy to drop those in chat. We'll be watching those, and if there's anything that you want to talk about or that you think about, please feel free to drop that in there, and we'll cover it as best we can. But I think to kick off the topics, let's talk a little bit about Indie Audio Labs, the brand there, and kind of what's new and what's been happening over the last 6 months with the company.
Well, the biggest thing that's new is, let's go back a couple years.
Okay.
Everybody had some fun with COVID and supply chain and everything like that. And so we have really thought, what can we do to make everything as robust as possible? So we have every vendor is as near to Indianapolis as they can be. So not only is our product US made, but we have local vendors as far as, board vendors and whatnot. So manufacturing is extremely well controlled. We're doing as much assembly as we can in-house, and we're selling product better than we have, and we're building more of it than we ever have. So if you were to be at the factory today, you're going to see a lot of guys building stuff. You're going to see our software development team. We're working to improve aspect. Everything about the unit. This is something kind of cool to think about. You're talking about what's new, but let's talk about what's new that affects a guy who bought an Act 4 8 years ago.
Right on.
Yeah,
Act 4 I've got is about 4 years old. So yeah,
and you want to update it to the 20 channel. Or let's say you bought an Act 4 24 years ago. the latest version of software for your ACT 420 user is going to give them better functionality. We're improving aspect all the time. But for the guy who bought an ACT 416, he can upgrade to the 420 and be in a better cost perspective than he would be had he just waited and bought the 20. I mean, we've actually beat inflation with our upgrade path, which is huge.
That's awesome. So somebody could go and find a ACT 416, buy it on the secondary market, and then upgrade it.
I mean, you're not going to beat it by much. I mean, it's like $1,000, but the idea is, if you'd bought an ACT 416 back when it was, the price it was in 2016, and you buy to upgrade, you're about $1,000 ahead of just buying an ACT 420 today. And no other company has really done that, and coming from the dealer side of things, that was something we were always looking for, is what's that processor we can get in our customers' hands or our own hands, because we all love this stuff too, that is not going to be obsolete. It's not throwaway, that you're not going to have to put on one of the websites like US Audio Mart, Aragon, or something like that and try to get rid of it, right? And go get the next one and do it again and do it again. And so with that, not only do we have a really nice platform, but all of our ACT 420 customers can enjoy the latest firmware. They can enjoy knowing that we have stuff still coming. I mean, we've unlocked functionality in the last couple months that is coming in, like probably a few months for release. We're testing new hardware all the time. We're just very busy bees doing what we should be doing.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying is we're not sitting on our laurels. No,
that's great. One comment I do want to make. Yeah, one comment I do want to make, and I've said this before in shows in the past, the device that people have that gets swapped out the most often is an AVR, right? So if you're living in an AVR world, you'll buy brand XYZ, and then next year they'll come out with a new model, and then next year they'll come out with a new model, and next year, and then you always have this pressure to upgrade and buy the new one because there is no upgrade path. A really big differentiator for the products that you guys have is that, the concept is you buy this processor, and then over time, as features are released, as long as the hardware supports it, you'll get an update and you'll be able to continue using that.
And the cool thing about it is we're growing, we're doing well, but we're still small enough to listen. So when our dealer base is telling us, like, it would be really cool if you could do this one thing, it's like, well, let me take that down. And it's like, hey, we can do that. I mean, it's not going to happen next week, but we can do that. Like that'll come. And so we're in a really great place. You try that with one of the big names and you can ask for see where that goes. Right. So we're listening, we're working towards all that, and obviously still made in the USA. And if, like I said, if somebody sends in a 16 channel ACT 4, upgrades it to a 20, that 5-year warranty starts over. Who else is doing that? So you pay for that upgrade. So think about this. If you buy a 16, use it for 4 or 5 years, even get out of the warranty, get to year 6, send it in for the big upgrade, you restart that warranty. You have 11 years of warranty on a single purchase. There's not a better foundation you can have in your system than that.
Yeah.
So instead of the processor being like a computer that you buy and kind of get rid of, it becomes the foundation. You might actually change speakers or get the upgrade itis somewhere else. I had a dealer the other day call up and say, how does it checking in? Are you going to have a new ACT 4 anytime soon? I said, no, the ACT 4, 3 years from now, we'll still be making it. If there's something new that we need to add hardware-wise, we'll do it, but there's always going to be an ACT 4. So the only way I differentiate them is the 16 channel than the 20. And if there's ever a significant thing next, I'll just hyphen it out with something else, because it's just, the ACT 4 has been that flexible for us. Rick and Ted and couple other guys, they put enough foresight to the engineering of the product so we could do that. If we look at something like a different HDMI card, are we able to get it in? Yes. We don't have a bandwidth problem somewhere else that's stopping that. So there's absolutely, I'm not saying it's limitless, because with technology you can't do that, but we've not run into something where it's like, oh, that won't work.
Right on.
It's been a really great platform for us.
Yeah, that's super cool. And I actually opened mine up. I probably shouldn't have, but I wanted to look around in there, and it's all quite modular, right? So, I don't think people have the option of doing, like field replaceable parts, but
we've walked some end users and dealers through HDMI upgrades and DSP card upgrades. Like beyond that, we would want it to just come back to the factory. But for some of the early units where there was a DSP card upgrade, we've walked people through that. I mean, that's 4 screws, you pop it in the socket, do a firmware update. That kind of stuff. If it's something that can be walked through, but ideally anything more than that, we want it to come back. And if it's a major upgrade, the warranty starts over.
Right on.
Minor upgrades, no, but major upgrades, yes.
Right on. So Dan's got a question, and before we get to your question, Dan, let me go ahead, and I think I've got this on Acurus. Yeah. So let me just so people can see. So let's go to home cinema and media room. So here are the two products, right? The Act 4 and the Muse. Let's talk a little bit about these, because I still do 100% of my subwoofer testing using Acurus Act 4 as the source, or as the processor, right? That sits in line. I have everything here at home, pretty much, but this is the one that I always use when I'm testing subwoofers in particular. I've got a Trinov Altitude, and I've got a Storm processor, and I've got an Onkyo, and but this is always the one. But anyway,
something I want to tell you about that when you're testing subs, and I don't mean to jump in, but I'll forget it.
Yeah.
Our processor will respond pretty much down to a cycle. So, some units, they start kneeing off at about 10 hertz or so because of the DAC and whatnot, but we can go down. There's a track, an album called Hellbase, and there's a track on there called Sub Baroque, and it plays a 1 hertz cycle, and you can play it on other processors and other preamps and DACs and things out there. And, you'll look at the woofer, and of course it responds to it, but not as dramatically. And since we don't knee that off, our subsonics and really fun LFE content is never shelved by the processor. So if your sub can handle it, it's there. And if the sub can't handle it, you can always set a parametric at a low frequency manually and dial back some of that ultra low frequency if the sub cannot handle it, to preserve your headroom. And that's one of the cool things about our product, is you can run aspect. And if you want to make a manual tweak to preserve headroom or something, you can do it. Other products out there on the market with subwoofers in particular, you run whatever they have, and then that's it. The processor's just set that way. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. No, I'm totally with you. And like I said, this is my go-to. And another thing that I really, really love is that it's really, really easy to set this up to do testing, at least in my situation. I mean, everything's just right there on the control panel, right? I can plug a sub in, I can plug a source in, and then I can go in and I can select the sub output, and it only plays that. And if I want to listen just to the sub on something that's playing, I can do that. It's super flexible.
As a dealer, I did it too. I would have two different brands of subs hooked up. And I would, how you can hit the EXT button and you can route whatever you're playing to just the one speaker in the configuration.
Absolutely. That's what I'm talking about.
I would do that. I would just route it to that one sub and crank up that bass heavy music, and I would temporarily flatten the PEQs because we're not going to do correction when we're just A-Bing the subs.
Yep.
And I would listen to the sub over there, and then I would hit the button. Of course, it'd be symmetrically placed, so there was no placement advantage for the subs. And I would just click the circle on the other sub, and I could A-B between the subs.
It's really, really cool.
Knowing that this processor was not holding anything back, because I have studio equipment that has that same ability to go down dang near DC, and this was kind of the first processor that did that for me. That was one of the things I'm like, I want to get involved with this brand. How can I help kind of bring this to the world?
Yeah, and the boxes are gorgeous too. I mean, they look super nice. But let's just talk through them real quick. The differences between the two. Obviously, the Act 4 is bigger. The Muse is 16 channels, right?
Yeah. See, the way I look at it is, you got 4 more channels in the Act 4. The Act 4 is for your guy who is maybe his room is home theater and 2-channel, and so maybe you need more analog I/O. On Act 4, you can make the height 3 also be an XLR input with a gender switcher.
Right. Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it has a phono input, and it's an MM or a higher gain MC phono input, but it's pretty dang good. And but you can also, it's got enough analog inputs, XLR and RCA, that you can hook up a really nice outboard phono pre if you wish. And so the Act 4, you have RCA outs, you have XLR outs, and in the extra 4 channels, you can make them be anything you want them to be. So if we're doing a 936, we can do that. We have that update comes pretty soon, so we'll truly be able to make that happen. Or if you want to, let's say you have a speaker where you want to bi-amp, or you have Wisdom audio and you have 2 amps that you need to feed the same signal. It's not advantageous to use a Y cable, so you can duplicate a center, or duplicate a left, or right. You can use the Tetra to do that, because you can kind of like a matrix duplicate any of those channels if you want to. The Muse doesn't do that stuff, but the Muse, one thing we did, is we put all of the important things in one nice 2RU box. So you'll notice the biggest thing is you lose a volume knob. The Muse, likelihood you're either using a remote, there's still a plus and minus button on the touchscreen. It's less IO, but it's the same DSP core. The sound quality is amazing. They're both made in USA. They're both 5-year warranty. Like, we did not water down quality on the Muse. But if you need the 20 channels for the biggest configurations, or you have kind of that mixed use room that's 2-channel and home theater, the Act 4 is the way. But if you don't need that, the Muse is not, I mean, it's not that much more than the competitors that are made not here. I'm not going to say who, but the Muse is like that step up from there, and it's only 2RU. I even tell people, I said, put a Muse on top of an M8 and it's the size of an Act 4. But guess what? An Act 4 is the size of a receiver. So you can do 7.1 in the space of a receiver with a pre-pro with us.
That's nice. Yeah.
Yeah. I've had customers with kind of a lifestyle system, meaning it's a living room. It's not a media room. And, the speakers are either in wall or they're like some on wall totems or something. And they sound beautiful with our Muse and the M8. And it takes up the room of a receiver so it can fit into whatever built-in cabinet is in their house. And it's able to work. And, somebody else's pre-pros the sides of the Act 4. That's the only option you have. And you got to go buy some huge amp, and you're able, like I said, just put those two together. They're the sides of most receivers on the market.
That's cool. Yeah, and then if you're doing the full 16 channels too, putting two M8s on top of it,
absolutely.
Maybe on the bottom.
One of my favorite configurations is you take a pair of M8s and you bridge a couple channel groups, and you get the, like I call it, the big 13 channel setup, where you have 3 big channels of 650 by 3, and then you have 2 small channels of 400 by 2 at 4 ohms or 200 by 2 at 8, and then you have 8 more channels. So that's still amazing. And you're only talking 6 RU. That's still not huge. I mean, there's 4 RU receivers out there, so 50% more space, and you're packing all of that wattage, all channels driven. Because I know I'm going outside the boundaries of this conversation about the pre-pros, but our amps, every pair of channels is its own power supply. So the Muse is cool because it's so small in format. We were able to use technology to our advantage to make that compact guy, and you're able to put it with an amp and have pre-pro performance in the space of a AVR.
That's super cool.
And it's still, if a new HDMI setup comes out, we can put it in the Muse. So the Muse is still upgradable, but it's not as flexible as the Act 4.
Right on.
But for the guy who's doing the combo 2-channel stuff, he's going to like having the volume knob right on the Act 4. He's going to like the extra 4 channels if it's a really serious layout, so on and so forth. So the flexibility, IO, the user experience. But as far as the core sound quality, the quality of the unit itself, that's shared.
That's cool. That's cool. Any improvements? Anything change in the Muse over the last couple of years as far as firmware or even hardware updates?
So firmware is, if we've got anybody out there watching this and they're not on 3.0.02, get on that. That's greatly improved firmware for the Muse, for stability reasons, to kind of get it, as quickly changing inputs without fuss as possible. Like, we're very solid there. As far as hardware, I think the Muse is a newer platform than Act 4 16. It's actually closer to the 20, so I don't think there's really been any hardware changes. We are testing a true 8K 2.1 board. We haven't released it yet, but I mean, we're on Rev 2. So the Muse and Act 4 at some point, that's out there. I can't tell you when that's coming. I would say like within a year, because our thing is, we're going to test and test and test and make sure that is absolutely rock solid before we get that out there. But fear not, we know it can work in these units, so don't let that stop you from getting one. I mean, that's the cool thing about it, is we know it will work. We are beta testing it. It's working. So
that's going to be nice.
That's nice, because there's people that have kind of wondered, like, is that even going to be possible? And it absolutely is possible. We're just not going to release it till the software behind it is rock solid.
Yeah, and so here's a depiction or images of the M8 and the M4. So 4-channel amplifier, 8-channel amplifier, and these are the same size as this Muse, right?
Right.
And they have that same kind of look, and they have a great aesthetic when you stack them up. It makes a really beautiful stack. So whether you need 16, 8 channels, 12, whatever, you can get that mix out of these 2 amplifiers. And then some other products
these guys are not really on the menu right now.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
2005, 2007. Honestly, I would prefer, and this is just me. I like the M8 a lot. It's one of my favorite amplifiers.
Mine too. Like
Yeah,
as an installer, I love the heck out of it because it's huge power. And especially, I don't know if anybody watching this is paying attention on this, but if you bridge the amp, not only do you get a little extra power on the left, center, and right, you're going to double your slew rate. So when you're listening to music, it's actually going to make the unit sound faster. I know that's a horrible metaphor, but it's going to
right.
higher slew rate is going to increase the sound quality of the unit, and our front end compensates for that, so it doesn't mess up the gain structure, it doesn't increase noise or anything like that. So when you do it on our M4 or M8, it really, I don't want to say it's not enough, but I feel like it's the best value in amplifiers out there. And you never want to say like we're not charging enough, but really the M4 and M8 are hard to be beat.
Right on.
But the AB
I
stuff
agree.
and the Aries, so we're looking at I see you kind of scrolled up to that.
Yep.
All of the AB stuff is kind of on hold right now. We're evaluating what can we do to make those products better. The M4 and M8 are so dang good that we've got to do something different with those other guys, to make them legitimately a reason to go AB. We need to look at them, and they're a great product. They're THX certified for the people that care about that, but sound good. But, we're talking about something that's a lot bigger, a lot heavier, more money. So, we got to figure out something to do with that guy. And M4 and M8 are awesome. And a new Aries is on the horizon. So be excited about that. Yeah.
Now this is I think the secret sauce that came out, I don't know, like 3 or 4 years ago, something like that.
I think about 3 years ago.
Yeah. So could you talk a little bit about Aspect and what that does?
So Aspect's different than every other room correction in that it uses all the microphones at one time. So anybody else, you're going to move the mic around. The turn-off mic's different because it has all the capsules on one thing, a couple inches from each other. Our setup, you start out with, you plug a box in the back of the unit and you have a mic box in the middle. And the cool thing about that is the room correction's outboard of the processor. And some people are like, well, hey, maybe that's not cool. Well, I decided it's pretty cool because as a dealer, I only had to buy one. I just used it over and over and over again. You can see in that picture, it's kind of like a pro grade setup. You have Pelican case, you have the 4 mics, the cables, and then there's a bag that holds all the tripods. And they're pretty good mic stands. And the difference is when you're measuring all 4 locations simultaneously, it gives us a really good thumbprint on the room. And it lets us have kind of a thumbprint on the speaker as well, because we don't want to change the sound of your speaker. If you bought, I'm going to say Bowers and Wilkins or Dyne Audio, Sonus Faber, Totem, Vienna Acoustics, whatever you bought it because somewhere in some big open room you liked how it sounded, right?
Yep.
Or Focal, whatever it is. But when you bring it home, you put it in your room. If your room's not very deep, whatever frequency's hitting the back wall, coming back on itself and collapsing and creating that null, well, that's not the speaker's fault, that's the room's fault. And so measuring 4 places simultaneously lets us figure that out. And you're not having to move the microphones in between sweeps. But because we measure them all at one time, we can differentiate, at 400 hertz, is that the mid bass and mid range characteristic of the speaker, or is it the room? And when you measure all 4 mics simultaneously, we can discern that. Say, no, that X brand of speaker, that's how that speaker responds. I don't want to take the speaker you paid money for and artificially flatten it to some arbitrary curve. But I do want to help the peaks and nulls that are caused by the room. So Aspect does a really good job of that. That's its strength. The setup is not bad at all either. The way you do it, you plug in the microphones, and as you go through them, the first one you plug in, it'll pop up on the OSD and it'll say, hey, this is mic 1. The second one, this is mic 2, and it'll graphically show you, depending on your layout, 1 row, 2 rows, where to put them. And as you place them, you hit go, and it's going to go through the sweeps. Now, of course, you're going to give it some target parameters first, like where you want to correct up to. If that's 200 hertz, 500 hertz, you select that and you go forth. But what makes it really neat is that if there's some huge technological advancement that comes out and you've already got an Aspect kit, well, we'll probably be able to handle it with firmware. It's a flexible setup. If we can't handle it for firmware for just whatever reason, that one piece can be changed. We don't have to change the mics. We don't have to change the mic stands. That one box can be changed. So think of it like your room correction is not frozen in time.
Right. It's upgradable just like everything else.
Right. It's kind of like the processor. It's upgradable. And if you buy it from a dealer, and so, dealers are all going to handle this differently. But what I did was, if I had a customer, it's like, hey, I want to do it myself. If they bought a unit from me, they could borrow my aspect kit.
Yep.
If normally I just did the calibration, we just kind of worked that into the install. But if they were just buying the processor and they're like, I like this, I want to do it myself. And a lot of people said, hey, you know what? It took another minute to maybe set it up, but I actually got through it faster because I didn't have to hear the same sweep through every single speaker and then move the mic 5 times or 9 times or however many times some competitor's thing made them move it. So it takes another minute to do the base setup, but since it gets through the sweep so faster, I don't know. I thought it was easier, so I've had some really good feedback on it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So we got one. Wow, Richard is on top of this. So he knows his stuff. And then a question, what is the power architecture of the M8 and M4? So it's Class D.
Okay, so the architecture of the amplifier, it is a Class D amplifier. When somebody says power architecture, I don't know if they're talking about the power supply, but the amplifier is Class D, and every 2 channels are a module, and every module has its own power supply. So if we drive all 8 channels, we get a really respectable number. Think of it like a under promise and over deliver. In the very worst case, you plug in an M8 to household power, 15 amps, you have some lights on the same circuit, a ceiling fan, and a TV. We can guarantee you're going to get 200 by 8 out of that amp, guaranteed. And by the way, this is a nice little touch we just started doing since I came on. We are doing a little proof of performance sheet that is now shipping with every single amplifier that comes out, saying, this amplifier's 8 channels. We promised this much, all channels driven, it delivered this much.
Nice.
That's cool, really right? Cool. Like, remember back in the day when you'd go get like I don't know, did you start in car audio or anything?
Yeah, totally.
I did. I bought an Orion HCCA amp, and it was kind of
the good days.
Rated like 2x75, but if you bridged it into like a 1 ohm load or half ohm load, it was like 1200 watts, right?
Yeah, I was like Mr. Punch 45, if you remember those.
Right. Yeah, and then even Rockford, I think to this day they give you those proof of performance sheets, and so we're kind of going to that level. It's like you're buying this American product, made here, guaranteed here, and this is what it did. A lot of people can say it's made here, but like I know that we already test everyone and we logged in a serial number, their AP performance, everything, but now we can kind of share that with you. And so you'll know that you paid for 200 watts and you got more. They all deliver more. And when you bridge them, I think we only say, hey, it's going to deliver 400 watts into any load. But in reality, they deliver 600, 650 into any load,
right.
Whether it be 4 ohm or 8 ohm. When they're not bridged, they deliver 400 and 4 ohms, 200 and 8. So it's a very robust amplifier. For 2RU, that's crazy.
Absolutely. That's really super cool.
Yeah, I had somebody say, why don't you guys make a receiver? I took a Muse, I sat on top of an M8, and I slid it across the table. I said, there's our receiver. Because it's the size of a receiver, and you can drive all 8 channels at 200 by 8. There's no receiver that I know of that can do that.
That's crazy. And look that good too.
Right, exactly.
All right, so I want to shift gears a little bit. So we've been giving Acurus all the love. Now let's talk a little bit about the other side. And this, I know less about the Aragon side,
Okay.
but there's been a lot of stuff happening on the Aragon side, and you can kind of see in the back there some of the cool stuff on the Aragon side.
We can see I have a Iridium on a little amp stand back there, and I'm using an Act 4 as the preamp right now. But just recently, I think it was into last year, we announced that we've been shipping them, and it's been taken off quite good. Is we have a tungsten. We actually have a dedicated 2-channel preamp now, and it does some really neat things. For one thing, you can do it has HDMI switching, so you can run aspect, right? Because that's the key to aspect, is it displays on your screen,
right? Yep.
So we have aspect capability in the tungsten.
That's cool.
Yeah. So we have a 2-channel unit with room correction. If you come in analog and you just want to stay analog, no room correction, you can absolutely do that. You can stay pure analog if you want to do that. If you want to come in analog, go A to D, you can select the sample rate, just like on the Act 4. You can do 96, 192, whatever. You can select it right there for the A to D. And when you want to look at flexibility, you can do subwoofer setups, kind of like the Act 4, but you can take it even further. Sometime in the next probably 3 to 6 months, we're going to have a firmware update that is going to allow the full 3-way very precise crossover configuration into tungsten. That's how the architecture was laid out. If you look at the back of the unit, you'll see main out, and you'll see kind of low and high, but really it becomes high, mid, and low.
Right.
And
right.
you're able to do that. So if you had a speaker that needed true three-way crossover, you could do it in this unit, or you can do something even more fun. You can do, like if you have a very large setup, you can have kind of a full range speaker, and you can have a really large powered sub. Like I know the guys that love Ascendo, you could have a 32 that focused on 30 hertz and down. And then you could have another sub that's an 18 or 15 or 12 or something that goes from 30 hertz to 80. And then you could hand off to the speaker next to it. And you'd be able to do separate EQs for each one, time alignment, all of that kind of stuff in the tungsten.
That's nice.
So you'll be able to do the most kind of ludicrous but glorious 2-channel configurations in this unit and do it with aspect.
That's cool.
And of course,
I love room correction in 2-channel. I absolutely love it. Some people are like blasphemy, but no.
Yeah, good. I mean, so, room correction is an interesting thing because a lot of people used to think, well, on 2-channel, it's not been as much of a problem. And then, of course, I go look at their room, putting my dealer hat back on, and they would have like all the treatment in the world there. It'd be huge bass traps, and the speakers would be pulled so far out from the wall. And it's like, well, yeah, that gives you imaging depth. And I knew why they were positioning stuff because they heard the null. They were kind of just working around it. But ultimately, you kind of just change where the null is. If you move the speakers out and move the couch forward, maybe 50 hertz is better. Now maybe 40 is not as good. So the room correction can kind of benefit everybody. It's not just a home theater thing, right? So, but here's the cool thing about it is it's still a wonderful piece. And if somebody doesn't want to use that, they don't have to.
Yeah.
Nice. But so,
it's for Dan, I want to jump to his question, and because I want to show him this. So he's on 2999 and wants to upgrade and use firmware. So this is what you need to do, Dan. So let me share this screen. So you'll come back to the Acurus website, and then here at the top, you'll see there's tools section, and you go down to firmware, and then if you scroll down, you have the IAL, the Indie Audio Labs tools guide. So you'll want to get the guide, but then the tool setup, you'll download this tool setup onto like a laptop. And this is how you're going to update that firmware. You're going to use your laptop following the instructions in the tool guide to do your update. And it's really easy. I've done it a bunch of times. I need to go do all of them again. But it's very straightforward. Anything to add to that, Richard?
No, I mean, once you get Acurus tool set up, there's one thing that I would say is the best hint. Power down to unit, by the back switch, plug into USB. Then, plug it into the computer, plug it into the back of the unit, and then you want to open up Acurus tools. Like it's already powering the hub in the unit, and so then you want to power the unit up. You always want to plug into USB and then power the unit up. If the unit's already powered up and you plug into USB, that's when we get a call like, hey, it's not finding it. Just plug into USB with the unit powered down and then power up the unit.
Nice.
So that's the best hint. Other than that, it's a very easy process. You just walk right through it, auto update, it finds it, and it takes 20, 30 minutes. It goes through all the different modules. That's kind of the cool thing about the unit being modular. But then when you do the update, it takes a little longer because, your overseas competitors, everything's on one board. With us, we have a DSP core, we have the separate HDMI, the separate main board, separate micros, which gives us this really cool upgradable architecture, but it upgrades each one individually. So you can go get a cup of coffee and come back and it's ready to go.
Yeah, that was going to be my tip. Just be patient, because it does. And okay, it takes forever. It's long, but be patient, and it'll get there. And I've never had one fail before. They've always worked.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say it takes forever, but it takes a little while. I'll say it like this: if you go get a cup of coffee and come back, it's done. When you stare at it like you're watching paint dry, it does seem like it takes forever. So don't do the paint dry approach. Go get a coffee, come back, and all is well in the world. And one thing you can use Acurus tools for is it's not just for firmware updates. You can back up your settings to the PC. So let's say you have everything tuned to perfection, whether you did it manually or you used Aspect. You can import to your PC, and you can save that for later because you never know. You might start experimenting one day, and you're like, "Oh, where was I?" You can take pictures with your phone. Yeah, I mean, we have that screen on the front, which is beautiful because you can take pictures of it, but ultimately that's hard to keep track of. So you can save it to your PC. Name that date, and you know that, hey, March 1st, 2024, system was beautiful. That's always your reference. You can always go back and import settings too. So
That's cool.
Acurus Tools is not just for firmware; it also is handy for that.
Right on. Okay, so let's I'm going to pull up the Aragon site here, and let's talk through. So the one thing I want to say is, back in the day, way back, I always thought of Aragon as like 2-channel stuff and Acurus as home theater stuff, but there's a lot of kind of crossover now. So is there really a distinction between the brands? Does one mean one thing? I don't know how to distinguish.
There is kind of a distinction right now. I mean, if you were doing the most extreme home theater on the planet, you could argue that I should just buy a bunch of Iridiums and go nuts, right? You can absolutely take our amps and use them in home theater. I'll let you in on a little secret. We're going to have some Aragon doing some home theater duty at Cedia.
Nice.
You know, so Iridiums, absolutely use them on your left and right, use them on your left, right, center. You can do that. We can mix and match at will. If you want to just run a titanium on your left, right, and run a M8 everywhere else, you can do that too. So feel free to mix and match on that front.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind having like 3 Iridiums.
Yeah, so Acurus will still have 2-channel stuff when we bring back an Aries replacement. So it's not that Acurus only does home theater. It's that Acurus is, you know, it's made in USA, so it's not pennies, but for what you're getting, it's a high value product. Aragon is a different beast. It's still high value. For the sound it gives you, it is absolutely high value. If you look at the inside, we spare no expense. I mean, even down to the power supply capacitors, there's guys out there that a cap is $10. Not us. We're running, I think they're like 37,000 microfarads per cap, 4 of them in the titanium and the iridium. And they're very expensive capacitors that bolt to the PC board that they're mounted to. And there's bypass resistors, they're bleeders, and it's a very robust amp in every single direction. You know, the relays are Potter and Brumfield. Everything is just the best part that the guys could find for that application in that one area. And, you know, it has the signature V notch in it. It kind of homage to the 4004 and 8008 and those guys. But at the same time, inside, this is not your 8008 from back in the day. There was a significant change in 2012 and 2016 looking at the different amplifiers, where we went all surface mount on everything that we could. I mean, obviously there's still a couple through hole devices, but going surface mount, going tighter tolerance on resistors and caps, going to the more advanced power supply design. I mean, you take an old Aragon and you try to mix it into home theater, you're going to have to go turn it on and off every time you want to use it. We have triggers on these. We have network monitoring. We have 4 temperature resistor or thermistors that are able to tell us the temperature to amp and report it to the browser interface. And so there's a lot of thought that went into these products. So a lot of people say, hey, it looks like Aragon from 1989 or 1996. It's not. It's totally different.
Right on. Yeah, and folks can kind of see the back of the air. Yeah, you can see the back of the Iridium right here. It's very cool stuff. I like. So
yeah,
is that
we already, because it's a thing, by wiring, we can argue whether we agree with it or not, but on some speakers, it really seems to make a difference. And you'll notice we put 2 really high quality sets of binding posts right on the back of both our titanium and our Iridium. So even our stereo amp has 2 pairs per channel, and the Iridium obviously also has 2 pairs. Another thing cool is you'll see the amps are completely mirrored. You're looking at Iridiums right there. Not only are they mirrored from the heatsink perspective, but if you look at the binding posts, the hots are both on the same, you know, they're mirrored from each other, and so the red and the black. So the amp is completely mirrored internally as well. They're identical, but one's backwards from the other.
Yeah, and so it looks really good when you have 2 of these monoblocks sitting on the floor beside each speaker, so to speak, right? And they're mirrored. It looks good.
Yeah, there you go. There's a little peek at that. It does look good, and they sound wonderful. Our slew rate on the monoblock is 240 volts per microsecond. It's half of that on the stereo, and even the stereo is 2 to 2.5 times faster than pretty much all the other amps out there. Now, having that really fast slew rate is huge, because our amp, the frequency response is neutral. But, you know, have you ever heard somebody say, hey, you know, I like a Totem Wind, I wish it had more air, or I like this Dyne Audio back here and I wish it had more air. When you put it on our amp that is so fast, the speaker kind of gets that feeling of more air and more presence, but it doesn't make the speaker harsh. We're not actually changing the response of the speaker. What it is our amplifier is just responding so fast that you're able to just hear all those micro details. And so speakers like the Wind and this, you know, so the Winds I have over here and the Totems, and I've got the Audio confidence back here. They can really shine on these amps. But at the same time, let's say you had a more forward speaker that you liked and you put our amp on it. Is it going to make it more forward? It's not. Our amp is still voice neutral. So we're not going to take a speaker with a beryllium tweeter and make it melt your face off. Our amp does not do that. So that's the cool thing about it is you remember there were some products out there, it was kind of the stigma that you needed to match this amp with this speaker. And with our amplifier, that's not really the case. It plays nice with pretty much every speaker out there because slew rate is never really a bad thing.
Right.
And our frequency response as measured, every single one that leaves the factory is AP tested. They're all flat to a deviation. It's almost unmeasurable. I mean, all the way down to 5 hertz, all the way out to over 100K. There's almost no deviation. I mean, we're talking plus or minus like fractions of a decibel, right? Our minus 3 dB point is at 5 hertz. Not at 10, not at 15, 5. We're only 3 decibels down at 5 hertz. That's where we barely start to roll off just to stop DC. We have a DC servo. We're DC coupled. So that means if you send 1 hertz to the amplifier, it responds to it. It's about 6 decibels low at that point, but it's absolutely faithfully tracking the signal. We're not capacitively coupled.
Right on. So I'm gonna share another product, which I'm really happy that you guys joined, and your website pops an extra window, so it makes me reshare here. So give me a second.
Okay.
But this product, in my head, kind of completed the stack that was needed from the Aragon product portfolio, and that's this guy.
The tungsten, that's what I was talking about earlier. Yeah, and you see right there on the back of it, we still have our XLR inputs, and we have 3 pairs of outputs, and that's that 3-way crossover ability. This
is a cool piece of gear.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at all of the inputs on this guy. So now you can get a wonderful Aragon stack. You use the tungsten along with 2 of the monoblocks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then whatever your source happens to be, and then whatever your speakers happen to be, and then you are in good shape. Now, one thing I don't know, is there like can you do DSP and then do like a subwoofer out on this thing?
Can we do what?
Can you use the DSP to cross over subwoofers to do a dedicated subwoofer out on it?
Yeah, exactly. So like low and high, you can make it to where you have a subwoofer output that way. So it doesn't have to be like bi-amping a 2-way speaker. You can do a dedicated subwoofer out. Yeah.
See that this is how I like 2-channel, right? This is, the pure analog stuff is all great. I don't have any knock on that at all. But, sometimes you have this pure analog preamp and that comes out, and then, okay, maybe I want to put it into an analog crossover so I can do subwoofers and just split that up. And this just does everything that I want it to.
What's cool about it is, let's say you're the guy that normally you would say, hey, these tower speakers do everything. But in reality, you place the speakers for imaging. That may not be the best place for bass in your room.
Yep.
Because of room issues. And so having discrete subwoofers is almost always a benefit. So we enable that. And at the same time, if you do want to be a purist and you're like, hey, for vinyl, I just want to go into this thing analog and stay analog, you can absolutely do that. If you go to the analog mode, you stay analog. We do not convert that to digital. But if you want to, you can use the DSP, you can run Aspect on it, and you'll see that it has 4 HDMI inputs. Here's what's really,
I was gonna point that out.
Not only for Aspect, but let's say the room is 2-channel, but you just happen to have a display. And let's say you're having a party and there's a bunch of people at the house, and in the room that's the 2-channel room, you just want to sit with your buddies. You have the game on. You can do that. You can play the game through your 2-channel rig if you want to. I mean, we just allow it. I mean, it's not taking anything away. We have 2 power supplies in this unit, so we have multiple stages of filtration, so there's absolutely no harm. And that's a question that's come up that I would actually like to point out. As people have asked, does the front panel display on all your units take anything away from the sound? I've noticed there's no pure direct mode where it goes black, and the real answer to that is we have 6 stages of separate regulation and isolation between the various parts of the unit on the main board that go out to other things like the display or the HDMI, so on and so forth. And so they're not really able to so-called corrupt each other. And when you build a power supply that robust and that well thought out, you don't have to turn the display off.
Yep. That's awesome.
On older units where they had to turn it off, it was because, maybe it was just a simple toroid with a filter bank, and that was it. That was your power supply. But in this guy, we have 6 stages to, one regulator feeds this with a bank of caps, one regulator feeds that, and so on and so forth. So they're all isolated and individually regulated.
We have some more royalty in here. Joey Peacock, who back in the day.
Oh yeah, we know Joey.
Yeah, everybody knows Joey. He's loving on some Acurus and some Aragon.
Yep.
I just saw him this past weekend at Audio Advice Live. Really good show. Really good show. Yeah. Good time.
Good dude. Everybody at Acurus loves Joey too.
Right on. So let's move on. We're getting toward the end of the hour, and I still need to do news and stuff, but there are 2 more things that I want to talk about. One is Cedia. Talk about what you guys are going to be doing at Cedia, and then talk about, folks want to buy this gear. Where do they get it from? So next 2 topics. So Cedia, what is it? What's it looking like for Indie Audio Labs there?
So we're not really laying out all the details yet, but I can tell you that we're going to have over 20,000 watts, and we're focused on sound quality. Now, can we deliver sound quantity? Yes, absolutely. Every subwoofer in that room can independently at 30 hertz deliver 120 decibels. But our goal is, with as many subs as we're going to have response down to below 10 hertz at very strong, realistic levels. We're going to have sound quality be the focus. So every speaker in its respective place is going to be as fast and accurate as it can be. Something that can really, think of it like a stethoscope to kind of hear our equipment. So we've worked with partners to pick kind of the best thing we can for this room. And I did kind of give you a preview earlier. That speaker behind me is going to be the 2-channel demonstration for Aragon, and we'll have some Totem stuff. I will tell you the brand we will be using Totem for home theater, but there'll also be some Dyne audio on the subs, and that's all I'm going to say for now. So we're working with our partners, and the details will come later, but it's going to be a really cool setup, and I think it's going to give people a really different view of what kind of sound you can get out of our stuff.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear that.
Like this, like when you have a sound, like a processor that sounds as good as the Act 4, where it's like audio file for every channel, but 16 or 20 channels, a lot of people go to like John Wick and they hear gunshots, or they'll go to Master and Commander and have cannonballs ripping through the ship, which, by the way, that's a really cool scene for not being Atmos. It's amazing. But, I can go to the intro of Back to the Future with all the clocks and revel in that sound quality and say, hey, this is almost on par with Pink Floyd's Time. But in a movie, when you have something that sounds as good as our electronics, movies become more interesting. You're not just always trying to listen to stuff blow up and hear cars haul. You're enjoying every little minutia of detail. Watch the intro to Blade Runner 2049. Yes, the eyeball scene at 28 hertz is fun, but keep watching. Listen to the scene where Dave Bautista comes into that room and you hear the pot of the suit boiling and all that kind of stuff. That's where we really shine. So we're going to pick some different demo material, and CD is going to be fun.
Yeah, as long as you don't play A Star Is Born or a Ready Player One, I'm down. I heard that more times than I ever care to hear. Oh my gosh. So Dan was asking.
Meter is being updated all the time. Somebody asked, where do you get the product? Our dealer network has grown a little bit recently, so there's more dealers popping up on there. And if anybody's looking for the product and they're like, hey, there's not a dealer in my state, just feel free to drop us a line. I think my contact information is on the website. If it's not, I don't mind handing it out. I will find somebody by you that will take care of you, because the whole point is, when you're buying one of these products, you're supposed to get some support with that. So we're going to find you a nice local dealer that can get you the product, help you if you have questions. Of course, we're here too, but we'll help you find that person. So if you can't find somebody on the locator, feel free to just reach out to the factory. We'll get you taken care of.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, we're going to shift gears here for the last 10 minutes or so, and talk a little bit about stuff in just broader industry, show things, and then some stuff about the channel. So for news, the one item that I wanted to call out, and I don't have, I should have downloaded and got the all of the graphics available, but one of my favorite TV brands, and this is, one of the scrappy upstarts, as some people think of them. I think they're well established at this point, but TCL is they've released, or at least they've announced, their Next Frame TV, which is going to be their first lifestyle TV. It's going to be kind of like the Samsung Frame, and Hisense has their version of it, and LG has their version of it. But this is going to be released soon. You know, they say it's the world's thinnest all-in-one TV. It's 1.1 inches deep, or 1.2 for an 85, which is, you know, it's pretty thin. But I've seen some pretty thin stuff. So, you know, I wonder how that claim is going to play out. It's got an anti glare screen and off-white bezel and flush wall mount, all this stuff, right? But the idea here is this is going to be their version of the TV that stays on all the time, that really adds to the ambiance. And I'll tell you what, I've got a Samsung frame, and we are so happy that we bought that television for the location where it's at, because, you know, it just cycles through all this great artwork. You know, I use it as an opportunity to kind of force feed classical artwork into my children because they might not ever see it anywhere else. And so so they're all like, oh, okay. You know, it's kind of like, you know, I'll play classical music in the background of the house. So they hear it. They have no choice, right? They come down and eat, and they're going to hear something, right? So I think that's kind of a cool use. But TCL does have that stuff out, and I believe they are going to have all of this at Cedia. And then also, I guess the last piece on this one is the audio section of the television is being designed by Bang & Olufsen. So B&O is going to do that. So TCL is licensing that audio technology from B&O to include in this television. And again, that's another one of what I consider to be like the world's most upscale lifestyle brand, if that makes sense. They're really awesome, and kind of like Steinway and Lingdorf gear, like the world's best lifestyle gear. So that's the new news. Then for channel stuff, let's see. I'll be at Cedia. That's the next show I am for sure planned for. There's a 2-channel show in Canada that I might go to in October, just depending on how that stuff works out. And then after that, probably CES in January will be the first of 2026. I don't know that I'm not going to go to Capital Audio Fest or Pacific Audio Fest or any of those. I don't plan to at this point anyway. And then, you know, we've got content coming for Onkyo on the RZ70. We got a couple of RSL subs. Actually, this is you know, this is the to-do list for the next set of videos that I need to do, which is a lot of stuff. But you know, it's better to be busy than not busy. So that stuff is coming, and I think that's going to bring us to the end. All right, folks. Richard, thank you so much for joining and updating everybody on Acurus Aragon. It was really awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, we need to get you up to the factory. It'll be fun.
That would be very cool. I would love to film that so people can see the entire team, like we were talking about before, right? There's a lot of folks.
Team, the production, all of it, yeah.
And it's all done here, which is really nice. It's all here in house. And then so everybody else that's out there, thank you so much for joining. Your time is precious, just like our time is. So we appreciate you taking time out of your day to come and sit down for a few minutes with us and hear about cool products and home theater tech and news that you find interesting. Remember, like, subscribe, ring the bell, do all those things. And with that, we'll see everybody in the next video. Take care, everybody.
Thanks.